welcome to the Black Man with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe through our experiences, successes, and our failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing called life. So again, welcome back. And today's conversation is about legacy. It's about legacy. Listen, most people hear that word legacy, they think about what they'll leave behind. Money, accomplishments, buildings, awards, organizations, titles. But I personally come to believe that legacy is much simpler than that. Legacy is what continues when you're no longer in the room. It's the values you pass on, the opportunities you create, the wisdom you share, and perhaps most importantly, the people that you prepare. Every generation faces a choice. We can either spend our time criticizing the next generation for doing things a little bit differently than we do, or we can invest our time in helping them do things better. So tonight we're going to be honest. We know every generation thinks the one behind them is getting it wrong. We hear it all the time. These young people don't want to work. They're too sensitive. They don't understand sacrifice. But since we're being honest, previous generations probably said the same thing about us. But today's young leaders, organizers, activists, and professionals, they're facing challenges many of us have never imagined. They're navigating a digital world, economic uncertainty, political polarization, and social pressures that move at the speed of a notification. And the question isn't whether they're different. The question is whether we're willing to help them succeed. So tonight we're talking about mentorship, leadership, activism, responsibility, what it truly means to pass the torch. Not because we're done, but because real leadership isn't about holding on to power. It's about creating more leaders. And so as we get started, I just kind of want to talk about the next generation, or every generation thinks the next one is different from how we did it. And we see it all the time, you know. We had conversations about basketball and football in our heydays and how they were different and it was better when we were growing up and how we prefer. But sometimes we have to be careful because especially as men of our age and our generations, a lot of times that mind state will get us to a point where we become closed-minded. And when you start to close your mind, you start to close your heart and you close your ears. And you're not willing to listen, you're not willing to grow, you're not willing to learn, and you're not willing to engage not only with younger generations, but with the people around you that you love. And so I think it's always important to keep an open mind. And a lot of times with an open mind, it helps to have a closed mouth while you have that open mind. And so, gents, I want to ask you, what's one criticism you've heard people make about younger generations that you think is unfair? And I'll say, let's start with Brother Ray tonight.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. And happy joy that you're starting with me. But man, what is one of the things that we say about the younger generation? Like you said, you named a few of them that they don't want to work. They don't know what they're doing, you know. And like you said, I know my folks had to look at me like this boy is doomed, you know, when I was coming up, because again, I thought I had all the answers when I really didn't, you know. And that's the one thing I say that we have to do as the now older generation, is that we have got to give the younger generation credit for the things that they do know instead of the things that we think that they don't know. So we have to check ourselves, because again, they have tools that we didn't have. I mean, they have the internet when our tools were, you know, encyclopedias and dictionaries. You know, they can go look things up and have something in an instant, and have different aspects on it. So that's where I would say is that we always say that they don't know what they're doing, and but we have to give them credit and check ourselves.
Oh
So,
man, I think one of the things we just like, hey, they just do things different. That's not how we did it back in our day. And you know, we always compare. Probably to me, the biggest thing we compare is going to school. You know, we didn't do it that way when he was going to school. You know, our teachers were different. But I had to learn one thing I had to accept, like even with my daughter, is for us it was like get out of the house, get a job, either go to school, go to the military. That's the only way you're gonna make a living. Well, now these kids are doing everything. They're using social media to make money. They're using their creativity because now it's creativity's embraced. When we was growing up, no, you wasn't creative as no artist. Artists don't make no money. You're not creative as a ball player because only the 3% make it to the NBA or make it to the NFL. So you got to do something different. But now it's there's no limits, for how they can make money now. So one thing we got to do is take the limits off them because they're learning to take limits off their abilities. And so I would say go back to your question, it was they do things different now. And sometimes what the next generation does different, we can't see ourselves doing that. We're trying to play catch up to what they do different. And sometimes what they do different is actually working. So for us, we just got to learn to embrace what they're doing different. Even with this podcast, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they would have told us, y'all wasting y'all time with that podcast. Get somewhere and get a job. But
yeah. So I think one of the things you hear about generations after us is that they're lazy or they don't want to work hard, which I think is unfair. I think they work differently, and and as it relates to legacy or moving forward, I think one of previous generations, no matter which generation it is, one of their responsibilities is to collaborate with generations that come behind them, because the things that they do well that we might not do well, combined with some wisdom, maybe a historical perspective, it might help them just make different decisions or choices, so that armed with their, ability to think differently and also to navigate tools that we might not be able to, I think those things combined will make them more productive and better able to move things forward that maybe the previous generation could not. I mean, a couple generations from now, they might not be swiping on iPads and, navigating computers the way that we do today. So things are constantly changing and evolving. And I think as I've gotten older, realize that, we bear responsibility to remain engaged, with generations after us and collaborate with them on how they can move things forward to make progress. So that's my initial perspective on, what people have to say about today's generation or generations after us versus, what the reality is. And I always, want to, I guess, be on the side of what could I do differently or better, as opposed to criticizing what they're not doing. They're doing things I wouldn't want to do, quite honestly, and they're doing it in ways that I might not have even thought about doing it. So, speaking of podcasts, I look at that and I'm like, wow. Would I be even involved in it if we didn't have Brother John and his younger mind and capability? I don't know. But that's why I think collaboration is so important, because guess what? He brings a skill set and a talent to the conversation that makes all of us more capable. And I think the same thing when we think about, generations after us and how we can contribute to them being viewed upon differently. Now, kick it back to Brother John.
We struggling when we call me a younger mindset, and I'm in my 50s. No. I appreciate brothers getting out here answering all the questions before I even ask them. One of the things I was gonna kind of, I guess, point to maybe are, what do younger people do better than us or our generation, and what strengths do we overlook? And some things that come to my mind, and I think, Ray, you'll appreciate this because this is a huge point of emphasis for you, and you really inspired me in this area. But mental health, their emotions and being aware of them. I'm coming up. Did men of my ilk and my age even recognize that emotions existed and that mental health was a thing? And it took tragedies and things shaking my world up later in life for me to realize that I don't have good mental health habits. I don't practice good emotional awareness. Even today, when I do those tests that show your emotional intelligence, it shows that I relate very well to others, that I'm aware of situations outside of me, but that I'm often unaware of myself. And I'm like, that really speaks to the generation that we came from. I lost a close friend a couple of years ago. And for me, it was just like, wow, we made it through our rough childhood. We made it through the gangs and, all of the stuff that was happening in the 90s and all the, we buried so many of our friends, and we made it and got to a point where we were having a life that we could be proud of. And then you haul off and die on me, and I just realized here in the past couple of weeks that I haven't even taken time to really properly mourn or accept how I'm feeling about losing him, And I think this younger generation does that better. I think they do a lot better job of being aware of how they're feeling and, what's going on in their heart and their mind. And obviously that's a collaborative thing, because as parents, as adults, in their lives, we have to encourage that, because we all know that you can have an adult and you be talking about feelings. He'd be like, man, shut your tail up talking about feelings, man. You a man. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. Or we could be someone that encourages them to find their voice. So I definitely think that's a strength that they have that a lot of times we didn't have, that we overlooked. What say ye, Doctor?
Well, it's like this. Once we, I guess for us, it's the next generation or the older generation. I think for us, part of our, I want to say, resilience or our reluctancy to embrace what the young people are doing is we don't want them to make the same mistakes that we made. And so and honestly, I think that's what it is. We're just like, hey, that don't make sense to me. I don't want you to make the same mistakes by wasting your time doing something that's not going to work. So, but also part of us have to be like, you know what? You got to let them go and make their own mistakes, because that's the only way they're going to learn. You got to let them go and experience. And it's like this. It's like what what we tell people in counseling. If somebody comes to me in counseling, as long as they're not trying to kill themselves or harm a child, I can't share what they tell me in confidence. So it's almost the same way with the generation coming after us. As long as they're not harming themselves, as long as they're not doing something to a child, you almost gotta, you know what? I'm gonna let y'all go and be great. It may work out, and they may come back and say, hey, can you give me some advice, because it didn't quite work out? Or you know what? Some of them gonna keep going till either it's gonna work, or what the old folks used to say, a hard head make a soft behind, right? So, so you just, and again, I'm just going basically for us. I know for me, a lot of it is just we don't want them to make those same mistakes. And when we think like something is not going to work, we just trying to give them the, the roadmap to prevent the pitfalls that some of us have experienced. So, but it's so again, like I said, you just gotta let them go and let them be great, and they'll figure it out one way or the other. That's how we was raised, right? You'll figure it out. So I'm done. That's my story for that. And I'm sticking to it. So, Brother Rod, you can be next.
Oh, thank you. So perspective is it for me, because I think that's the one thing that people have that is typically different. How we gain it is different, but it's the one thing that that I also think that we can share. Just here's my perspective, and and I do that with my sons even. Like, I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but here's my perspective. I would just ask that you consider the 20 some odd years more that I've walked this journey through life, and just take whatever you can from it and learn from it. And if you feel like you want to repeat the mistakes that I share with you, then by all means, have that experience for yourself. I think as parents, as mentors, as those that might have a little wisdom about some things, we would hope that people would be willing to learn from that. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they want to do it their way. I just always tell people, just don't make any life-altering bad decisions. Those that land you in places where you can't move how you want to, when you want to. You have to wait to be told or allowed, And then also, maybe it's kids before you're prepared to deal with that and how it will change your life. But ultimately, I think it's people's perspective, that drive their decision making. And I just think the more collaboration we can have one another, the more we can learn from one another. So.
I appreciate what you just said, especially when you were talking about talking with your sons from your perspective. Because I've had that same conversation with my daughter. With both of them, but at least more than with Simone, because Simone still, Simone's father is active in her life. So she has him and has her mom, where she could bounce ideas off of them or, get their perspective on things. But, with Elise, one of the things you said is, what I used to tell her is I don't want you to make the same mistakes I made. I remember one day she had asked me something and she said, Dad, I just need you to take off your dad hat for a moment when I asked you this question. And I stopped her and I'm like, that's one thing I can't do. And she said, why not? I said, because no matter what, I'm going to be your father. I said, I can't give you something from the perspective that you're asking me, when the reality is always going to be, no matter what, even through death, I'm going to be your father. So I can't give you something from that aspect. And then she would say she said what she had to say or what she was thinking. And it was actually something that one of her friends said, and she was trying to get my perspective. And I'm like, I'm glad your friend said what she said. And the things that she said, I thought. but I couldn't say them as your father because the one thing I didn't want to do was I didn't want to be my dad. I didn't want to give things from my perspective and say, okay, it's like this, and that's the way it is, and da 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 da, you know. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. That's one of the things I wanted to change about myself, because there were things that he did, and he did the best he could when it came to raising me. But I had to sit back and say, okay, I can adopt certain things. There are some things I'm gonna scrap, and I'm going to do things. I'm going to do the opposite of what Dad would have done in this instance. So one thing I am proud to say that, and I'm speaking for all of us here. One thing that we did is we did break a cycle. Um, we were talking about emotions. John was talking about emotions and going to counseling. We would have been called soft back in the day, you know, from not only our parents, but from our peers. And now we understand that it is okay to not be okay. It's okay to seek help. And it doesn't mean that you are, as a man, it doesn't make you any less of a man by seeking help and trying to better yourself. That is a strength, you know. So that's one thing that, you know, another thing we were taught is men don't cry. I know there were times I went through something and I couldn't cry to save my life, and now it's like the emotional waterfalls will take over, you know. And you know, my daughter was here, and the first I told you, brothers, a few years ago, she gave me my first Father's Day card, and I sat there and I cried in front of her because, again, I'm not ashamed of it. It's not a weakness. It is a strength, and she understands that my dad is human. He's not a machine, which is what we were shown when we were coming up. So that's my take on it. John?
Sir? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, gents. Thank you, gents. And I do want to put in a apologetic producer's note. You know, when I was putting the notes together, definitely when I was asking these questions, it was not my intention at all to put anyone on the defensive. It was definitely my hope that these conversations would inspire us to share wisdom that would be helpful for younger generations and people that are navigating that, because we have the privilege of being in a position where there are a younger generation or younger generations that are behind us that are coming into that point where there's a generation coming behind them that could use advice and support in that means. So I definitely don't want any of you to feel like I had any intention on putting you on the defensive. It was more of an intention to encourage and inspire a positive discourse and things that we could share to a younger generation that often feels like they have to take on a combative and argumentative stance with generations, whereas Rod said we can collaborate instead of looking down and judging and things like that. And I think that every generation gets judged before it gets understood. I remember when hip hop emerged, obviously people criticized it. When social media and specifically social media activism emerged, you know, there was a lot of talk about that and people had lots of negative things to say. And when young people challenge old systems, oftentimes people criticize that. And sometimes what we'll call disrespect is actually innovation. Sometimes what we'll call impatience is actually a real urgency for change. And so with that in mind, how about we talk about the difference between mentorship and control? And I think this might be the most important part of our conversation because, you know, I know growing up, sometimes I'd hear older leaders say they want to mentor young people, but what they really wanted was young people to be compliant, do what they say. And they want people to do things exactly the way they did them. And I just disagree with that. I don't think that's mentorship. I think that's replication. You know, that's just trying to make carbon copies. And so I kind of just want to throw this out to each one of you. What's the difference between mentoring somebody effectively and controlling them? And so this time we'll start with Brother Rod.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point you bring up. And I do think that people that make the decision and commit the time to mentoring others A lot of times they probably do want compliance and control because I've given something that's extremely valuable to this process. And if you're not going to listen or if you're not going to comply, then why would I do that? So I think that you make a great point there. And I think it's something that, that we have to, consider strongly when we're engaged with other people, so instead of, the expectation of compliance or trying to control another human being, we should approach it from a spirit of collaboration. Literally, hey, you accepted me as a mentor. I am here to mentor, and with that, I want you to be able to gain from some of the experiences I've had, maybe some of the things that I've learned, and I'll lay it all out for you. And then you can decide what's important to you from that, what you value from that, what you can use from that. And if you're even wanting or willing to apply any of it to your life or your own situation. And as a mentor, I think going in, I need to understand that, I am giving of this freely, no matter what the decision ultimately is about how they utilize it. And that's the mentoring part from my perspective. Now, what they choose to do, because a lot of times, and even in my own experiences mentoring young men, they might not do anything with it today. But then I'll get a call 2 years later saying, hey, coach, I just wanted to let you know I did X, Y, Z, and I wanted to thank you because it was the conversation we had when we met 2 years ago. So while you might not think that I listened or paid attention, I did. I just had to process it and understand it and understand how to apply it to my life. And of course, experience kind of helped shape that and shape the timeline. So, but I do think that it is, a challenge and a problem because I have heard, successful people say, well, my time is valuable. Okay. I submit to them that everybody's time is valuable. So you're not really, providing any great revelation there. What you're really saying is that I believe my time is more important than your time. And then that's a terrible message to send to someone that you're trying to inspire and encourage and help them on the come up, right? So I do think that, that we need to be cognizant of that and very careful about how we approach that, I think we all know, especially from a mental health perspective, that words matter. And when you're dealing with people, and we've already, confirmed here that the generations that came after us are probably a lot more in tune with their emotions and their mental health or mental stability or mental state. So, we need to just be aware of that. And so my thing is always, approach us from a place of love and true care. And if you do that, then hey, I want to give this to you. I want to give you this time. All right. What you choose to do with it is up to you. But I'm going to give you everything that I have to give because, I'm already here. We're already engaged. So why would I hold back now? just because I don't think you might make certain choices. And I always like to remind people that, ultimately, my recommendation is learn how to stack good choices on top of one another. That provides the stair step to your life and where you're ultimately going to go. But it's your choice, because no matter what decision you make, the consequences you will own, whether you want to or not. They will be yours. And so, and no matter what you decide, I'm always here, a resource for you, So, and I'm not here to point fingers or place blame or say I told you so. I'm here to say that, for me, the young men that I mentored as a young man trying to find his way in this world, some things you're going to have to learn on your own. Some things you're going to have to learn the hard way. I'm just here to offer you some perspective and insight or wisdom about the things that I learned, so, but I love that. And I think people appreciate that without the judgment, because, in human nature, it's just easy to be judgmental. And, and I would even, offer that up to any of you brothers, anyone that I've ever cared for, that if I've ever come across as judgmental, please, charge it to my head and lack of maturity at that state in life, and not towards the fact that I truly care about, what ultimately happens to all of you. So that's what I had to say about that, man. I'll quit pontificating and pass it on to Brother B.
Before you pass it, I had to jump in on that, because what you were saying was just resonating, because, you're making the point of how you share mentoring, or you share your wisdom, and, you get frustrated. And I know of everybody that is in here tonight, I'm probably the one that frustrated the most people the most times out of all of us. And I think about all of the wisdom that all of you were sharing with me during my career. And I just think about, like, at Master Sergeant, man, I was production, but I was pure ego. And I just wasn't as ready to lead as I thought I was. But I was full of belief and full of arrogance, irrational confidence.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, man. In fact, I was going to mention to you and reach out, because I was going through some papers that I had in a file drawer. They were from my work files, and I brought them home because I was getting ready to shred them. And I came across a couple of your evaluations from when you were a senior airman.
That's decades ago. Good night.
Yeah. And I was reading through it, and I started smiling, because, maybe what contributed to what you say your state was the fact that you were really good at what you did, at least according to the evaluations you were. So
I was good. I was always frustrated that people didn't recognize how good I was. That was a consistent frustration throughout my career.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah, I always know that you would achieve and be great like you became. And when I was looking through those evaluations, like, confirmation. So I would assume that you have them, but if you don't, I'd be more than happy to share them with you.
I think they're in my file that I shared. I mean, that I saved. Yeah, I think I got all of them in that file.
Okay.
Yeah. I look back at them for a laugh from time to time. But yeah, I thought I remember when I got to senior, and there were times when I just Rob, me and you had conversations with us talking about we needed new leadership and stuff like that. But what you said about sometimes it's not the right time resonates because I felt like I was past my time. I was ready to retire when the opportunity for chief came. But I realized that I had a lot of that wisdom and that it had time to really simmer and giving me something that I could use that was of value at that time because, again, a lot of the success was fire and feeling overlooked and things like that. And it wouldn't have been useful in a space where now it's not about my accomplishments. It's about the success and the health and the morale and the welfare of my teams and my people. And so, when you were just saying that, it just resonated with me because I'm like, yeah, y'all gave me great mentorship. It was just so many times I chose not to apply it because of my own hubris. But when it really came time for it to shine through, it was there when I needed it most. And it ended up, happening at the time that it was supposed to.
Yeah.
Dr. B, let me pass it back to you now. Sorry about that.
No, man, y'all was taking us back down memory lane, so that's good. It just showed. It kind of leads into what the point I was going to make was, the difference between mentorship and control is a good mentor will understand that I'm going to guide you through this process, but you're not going to be just like me. And I think that's what control comes in. You'll have mentors like, I want you to do this just like me because I want you to have these same results that I have. And so even as as someone who is being mentored, you can't look at your mentor and say, I want to be just like you. I mean, you can, but you got to understand that everybody's walk is different. The people that you're going to impact is going to be different. And because of that, yes, you can take some of those skills that you learn from your mentor, but it's almost like when we went to recruiting school, they was like, hey, this is how I want you to do it while you're in this class. But once you get out of the class, you got to tailor it to your own style, to the people you're going to impact, to your unit, to your part of the country. And so it's the same way I think a good mentor understands that I'm not going to control you. I'm just going to give you the roadmap, and then you go and figure it out and be successful the way you want to do it. And I think the people that control, and I thought back to control, sometimes you think about church and that how, some people want to take credit for your success. And so that's part of that control is they want you to always remember that they were the one that opened the door for you. They want you to remember they was the one that always gave you your first $100. And I think a good mentor, guess what? I'm not going to go back and remind you of every little thing I did for you to get to your success. You know what I'm saying? That's just like Rob made the example. He looked at your past evaluation. Would it be like Rod every time? Hey man, back in '62, I taught you how to do this, and you wouldn't be able to get here if it wasn't for me doing this. Nah, that's not a good mentor. A good mentor is like, you know what? I can look back and say, I gave you guidance, but guess what you did? You ran with it and chose your own path, and you got it done. So to me, that's the difference between what a mentor really does. Is they're going to give you the roadmap, but they're going to let you run with it, let you do what you do great, and then not turn around and try to either take credit for it or remind you of what you were prior to that mentor coming into your life. Because that's part of control too. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be able to be here. And nah, you don't need that. So, all right, I'm done. Give it over to Ray, but yeah.
Well, I appreciate you, B. But man, look, I can tell you with certainty, I wouldn't even itch in my daddy's pants back in '62. You talking about way back in '62? Come on, bro. but but anyway, moving forward, the difference between mentorship and control. You brothers have hit on some great points. And I looked up the definition of the word control. There are several definitions, but the one that stuck out to me was to exercise direct influence or power over something. And the key word to me was power. A lot of folks, that, like you said, they're doing things because they want to do it. I want you to do it exactly like this because this worked for me. Where, like you said, for with us, we actually we all let everybody develop on their own. Here's information once again, like with our children. Here is from my perspective. This is what I would do if I was the one in this situation. We're all not cut from the same cloth. We all don't have the same thought process. So we're all going to do things different, and nobody is going to make the same decision that the other person, or what would Ray do, or what would John do? They might do that and say, what would this person do, and then tailor to their decision to themselves. So to me, that's the biggest difference. And again, for the mentorship part of it, we gave freely of ourselves. I don't know about y'all, but I did have one or two good mentors through my Air Force career before meeting you brothers. Which is rare. Which is rare because, like I think John said it. Everybody wants. John or Byron said it. I'm going to remind you that I did this. I'm the reason that you were successful. I'm the reason that you have the amount of stripes on your sleeve that you have. No, it's not. That's not the case. I might have provided the information. I may have said, this is how it worked for me. This is what I can say with my recruits. This is how the Air Force has worked for me through my career, but this is going to be different for you because you're not going down the same path that I went down. And things are going to work out for you the way that they're supposed to work out. I remember talking a few seasons ago about one of my he wasn't my troop, but somebody I took under my wing, Justin. And it was a beautiful thing to have that young brother call me and say, sir, I listened to what you said. I listened to what you said. And because I talked to him about instant gratification and delayed gratification. And he finally, as he got older, started deploying the delayed gratification. And he came back and said, it doesn't feel any less great when I put it off than if I did try and get it immediately when I had that you only live once mentality. Looking at John, you talked about your team accomplishments. Man, I sat back and when you said it, I'm sitting here thinking about my recruiting team, my last recruiting team. And I'm like, all of them, all but three of them have retired now. They're all wearing the lowest ranking out of all of them is wearing Master Sergeant. There's a senior in there and there's a chief in there. That had nothing to do with me, but I took the time to say, how can I help you? Another one, she was the recruiting and retention superintendent for the state of Florida. And y'all all know T. When I got to Baltimore, she was like, I think I want to go take this in-service recruiter position. I'm like, okay, where do you want to go? I really want to go to England. How can I help you? And then when she found she had applied for like 4 or 5 of the positions, and she got mad because she didn't get the other 4 that came up first. And I'm like, T, why are you upset? And she's like, well, I didn't get those. I said, but which one did you want? England. I'm like, okay, England wasn't in there. Why are you upset? Calm down. Let's see what happens. Next thing you know, she got notification she was going to England. You know, so again, sometimes the mentorship where we can, as hot-headed as we have been at times, we learned to bridge the gap, calm everything down, say, okay, look at it from a different perspective. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is through the mentorship process. One of the things that we all, and I can say this again as a group, did with all sincerity is we understood that we were not going to be around forever. So we made sure that we had people ready to replace us when it was our time to go. We all have had people in our careers that I know my predecessor in Baltimore. This dude, the only person he was concerned about was himself. He didn't want to retire. That man sat in the same position for 16 years. I don't know how many people he held up, but he sat in that same position for 16 years. And it was ridiculous, but he didn't want to mentor the people that should have replaced him. But once he was out the door and I came in, I went to the senior ranking too. And I'm like, one of you is going to replace me when I leave. Because if I die tomorrow, the job advertisement is going to be on the street the next day. So one of you has to be ready to replace me. And I want both of you to be ready. So one of you get this position because I want to be the last person that it goes out of house to get this position. I want to make sure that you, as my subordinates, get this position because I want you to, I feel you will have earned it and you will deserve it. So that's the one thing I would say that the biggest difference between mentorship and control is the mentorship part to me, again, is that you give freely of yourself. You give the advice and say, this is what I would do if I was in a situation, but let the person go ahead and do what they feel is best for them. And as Rod said, you're going to suffer the consequences if it's the wrong decision, but you'll recover from it. And then control is having power over the entire situation or power over somebody. So that being said, John, I'll pass off to you, brother.
And the way y'all brothers came through, we should almost close the show, but I think we got a little bit more left in us. But y'all really, really got after it. I mean, how do we share wisdom without demanding obedience, making room for new ideas, when we should step back? You know, we asked ourselves the kind of questions, man, if we could only pass a few things on, what would they be, you know? And just listening to all of your answers, you know, I could see themes like integrity, literacy, a responsibility for community, you know, faith, resilience, emotional intelligence, critical thinking. And, you know, for me, one thing I think we absolutely got to pass down is an understanding that individual success isn't enough. You can have money and titles and influence, but if your community is struggling and you've done nothing to help, I think that's the opposite of leadership. It's just achievement. So I think the next question before we close it out that I want to hit y'all brothers with is what needs to be left behind. So we talked about what should be preserved. Now let's talk about what needs to be retired. What beliefs, habits, what kind of mindsets should our generation stop passing down? And off the top of my head, I can think of some: toxic masculinity, scarcity mindset, shame-based leadership, hyper-individualism, all kinds of things. But there are just some things that we might have been carrying that prior to us were the right things to do, but we need to leave them behind as we pass on positive things to this next generation. So with that, I'm going to start with Brother B.
All right, some things we should leave behind. That's a good one. I mean, you named some things. I guess the main thing is, and we should leave to encourage people to have an open mind. Because when we pass off a closed mind mentality in the sense of, well, that's the way we used to do it, why would you want to do it different? why would you want to change it? It's been working so well for the last 10 years. Why would you want to change that? Why would you want to change the way we vote? Why would you want to change how you accept people because they have a different lifestyle than you do? So yeah, I would say let's not leave behind being closed mind in the sense of not being able to embrace new ideas. I mean, I just had a phone call today with a broker, and she was saying, you'd be surprised how many people, when I talk to them about changing insurance companies, and I can save you $2,000 a year. Oh no, I've been with XYZ company for 15 years. I'm going to stay with them. And she's like, why would you do that when I can save you $2,000 a year and you could do something else with that money? So yes, and I'm not saying we go with every win, and as the Bible says, go with every win and doctrine that comes along. But at the same time, let's leave behind the ability not to be open-minded, for sure. So I'm done with that. I'll pass it on to Brother Ray.
All right, thanks, B. The one thing I would say, a couple things I say that need to be left behind. Feelings of being irreplaceable. We need to let go of fears of being replaced. We need to let go of fears of inadequacies. We need to let go of the fear of being forgotten, because our job is to lay the groundwork to ensure the success of those who follow us. All wisdom needs to be preserved. One thing that we do know is the more things change, the more things stay the same. Similar situations will pop up, and having the lessons from or past lessons will prevent future generations from having to reinvent the wheel. Bottom line, I'm going to use one of the quote from it was a good old 3701st Basic Military Training Squadron slogan. What we need to do is lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. And that being said, I'm gonna pass it on to Rod.
Yeah. So
Basic training slogan.
yeah. I think one of the things that we certainly should leave behind is this shroud of secrecy that we have held so near and dear for way too many generations, as opposed to literally opening up and allowing people to learn from some of our failures. I would hope that most of us have learned, along the way that it's okay to fail at things. If you're not failing, you're not trying. I mean, there's so many things that I think about with regard to that, and whether or not we want people to have knowledge of our failures. And quite honestly, me personally, it took a while for me to truly embrace that and understand it. Because like everyone else, I mean, we deal with our own, trauma surrounding things, and we have to grow and mature and understand that, I am who I am, imperfect in all the ways that I am. But there's only one person who can judge me. I had to literally start believing it and living life in that manner, so, but I do recognize that, the shroud of secrecy that we have always in our community held as sacrosanct for whatever reason, has caused some guys to date their sister without knowing, because people would not tell the truth about their misgivings. So I would just hope that, you know, that we can get away from that and really lean into the fact that, you know, I just am who I am, and only God can judge me. And if you feel so judgmental about the thing that you learn of me that you don't want to associate with me anymore, then I need to recognize that you were just there for a season and not a lifetime. Or you were just there for a reason and not a lifetime. And truly embrace that. And I would tell you, man, you know, just me personally, and I would just share with you brothers and who's ever watching that, you know, it took me a while, but I've really grown to be extremely comfortable in my own skin and embrace all of my own shortcomings, knowing that I have a greater purpose here, and has nothing to do with what people, mortal beings with the same sinful nature, with the same shortcomings or other shortcomings, what they might think about it. I don't need to know theirs. Don't care whether they know mine, because that's not my focus in life. There are much more important things that we need to be really getting after. And if this society today has not shown us that, we're sleepwalking anyway. So with that, I'll call it done. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, when you talked about embracing yourself, it just made me think. I think at any level, those are truly the people that shine, the ones that have truly embraced and accepted themselves, because they no longer feel that urge or desire to control somebody else. And, you know, those kind of leaders are just amazing. And I think that's important. And gentlemen, man, it was hitting on all cylinders tonight, man. I appreciate y'all. You know, as we close out, we know that every generation inherits wisdom, but every generation also inherits wounds. And so part of leadership is deciding which one you'll pass down. And I think tonight's conversation reminds us of that. You know, leadership isn't measured by how long you can hold the spotlight, but it's measured by what happens after you leave it. The best leaders don't create followers, they create leaders, as we said earlier. And, you know, the best movements don't depend on one voice. They develop many voices. The strongest communities don't cling to the past. They honor the past while also preparing for the future. And at some point, every generation has to decide whether it wants to be remembered for protecting its position or expanding the opportunities. Because the torch, it's never ours to keep. It's ours to carry for a while. And then when the time comes to pass forward, not reluctantly, not fearfully, but proudly, because we've done our job, the next generation won't simply continue to work. They'll take it further than we ever could. And so with that in mind, we're going to close out with a quote like we do every week. And I just want to tell everybody to hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Langston Hughes. And with that thought, again, thank you, brothers, and we're out of here.